In the ancient capital of the Persian Empire, now in southern Iran, there is a remarkable and mysterious carving. A series of curly-haired men or boys who look like they could be sub-Saharan Africans approach the throne of the Persian King of Kings, Xerxes I. But all of the attention and the controversy centers around the animal they have brought to Persia. And what is it? Here it is. It has a long neck, a ridged mane, two little horns. Now, there are a few contenders as to what this animal might be. You're probably already thinking of a giraffe, for example, but interestingly, many scholars disagree. One theory in particular about what this animal is truly mind-blowing. But to accurately identify this animal, we first need to establish a bit of context. We need to understand what the Persian Empire was. We need to know a little bit of the history of the 5th century BC. After we know a little bit about Persia and the various animals in the empire's grasp, we can identify the beast together and reflect on what its presence in 5th century BC Persepolis actually means. So, what do you think the most underrated ancient civilization is? For me, it absolutely 100%, without a doubt, has to be Persia. For people in the West, we just see the Persians as these big, evil, effeminate, degenerate baddies who are just always trying to invade Greece. That's pretty much all we know about them. And then, of course, Alexander the Great seems to conquer them easily enough, so they weren't even that tough to begin with. They were a paper tiger, maybe. Of course, the most ridiculous and over-the-top depiction of Persian barbarian degeneracy is the movie 300. In that movie, Persians are depicted at their very best as a weak and incompetent horde and rabble, and at their worst as disgusting mutant goblin freaks or satanic gimps, basically. But in reality, the Persians had a vast and complex, continent-spanning empire. It was an ocean of civilization. It stretched from the Danube in modern Bulgaria to the Indus in Pakistan, from the Balkans in southern Europe to the Himalayas. This was an absolutely enormous area, the biggest empire that had ever existed on the planet up until that point. The Persians loved gardening. They had incredible architecture and amazing art. Indeed, Persia was in many ways the successor to Mesopotamian civilization, as well as the ancient Elamite culture in Iran. In the Persian Mesopotamian heartlands, cities like Uruk had been keeping records and making monumental buildings for about 2,000 years before Greek was ever put into writing. So, on the more objective view, it was the Greeks who were irrelevant barbarians compared with the might of Persia. But you will recall in 300, alongside the hordes of gimps, there were also lots of exotic and frightening animals. Elephants, rhinos. In this, there is at least a splash of truth. For this vast and formidable empire did spread its tendrils down into Africa, as far south as Nubia to the south of Egypt. And this Persian limb which dangled into Africa can give us some hints as to what we think the beast of Persepolis might be. Anyway, let's get the duller theories out of the way first. One is that this animal is just a giraffe. Yawn, boring. Fair enough, fair enough. A giraffe all the way over in Iran is actually a pretty exceptional gift, so it would be pretty cool if it's a giraffe. It could be a baby giraffe to account for its very small size, but the proportions and what the horns look like and just generally what this animal looks like, it's a bit wrong. It doesn't really look like a giraffe. It looks giraffe-ish, I suppose. Still, we need not think that the sculptors portrayed the animal fully accurately. They may have made mistakes. This might have been quite an unfamiliar animal. In fact, it's been argued that this scene may have been copied from an Egyptian original, as tribute scenes in Egyptian art are quite common, the pharaoh often being gifted giraffes and other animals by his Nubian subject. So, look, there's no getting around it. The giraffe is still a strong option. However, here's another option. A Nilgai. A Nilgai is an antelope of the Indian subcontinent who does look quite a lot like this animal. It's got a long neck, it's got short little horns in the right place to be this animal. But the face of the animal in the carving doesn't really look that Nilgai-ish. And also, what about the people bringing this animal with their tightly curled hair? They look like they're from Africa. It's not actually impossible that a delegation of Africans purchased a Nilgai somewhere from some market on the way to Persepolis. Perhaps they came via sea and actually came to Persepolis via the Gulf of Iran, or maybe they came from the west and there was just a Nilgai in a market to the west of Persepolis. It's not impossible. I do think it stretches credibility a little bit. but it's still not impossible. But anyway, this has all been fluff. This has all been building up to my favorite theory. Are you ready for this? Many scholars have argued that this animal, the mystery beast of Persepolis, is an okapi. Okapis are the coolest freaking animals ever. I love these guys. They're related to giraffes, but are native to the forests, the dense rainforests of Central Africa. And they kind of look like a giraffe mixed with a zebra, like I say, from these lush forests. Just such a shy and beautiful and incredible animal, and a rare one. So according to this website, right, the Congo rainforest is roughly, give or take, 5,500 miles away from Persepolis by land. You know how far that is? That's roughly the same distance from Alaska to Guatemala. It's an absolutely mental distance, if true. So here are some reasons why it might be an okapi beyond the mere appearance. One is that the people who brought the animals seem to be Africans. However, they are depicted as really small, much smaller than their Persian usher. This means that they could have been young boys, or this could have just been an artistic choice or an architectural necessity to make them so small. They are quite close in, hemmed in by a step there. However, another theory is that maybe these were pygmy peoples, people native to Central Africa. This might seem a bit ridiculous, a bit far-fetched. I mean, really? Were pygmies from Central Africa coming to see the King of Persia? But it's actually more plausible than that when you look into the evidence. Such people were known to the ancient world. Two examples of this, one from the late Old Kingdom Egypt, okay, substantially earlier than this, but still, of an Egyptian expedition which found a dancing dwarf or pygmy and brought him back to the pharaoh at the time. The guy who brought the pygmy back was called Harkuf, and this dancing pygmy absolutely delighted the young boy pharaoh Pepi II. But here's perhaps a better example, which is much closer in time to when the beast of Persepolis was carved. And this is Herodotus' story about the Nasamones, a tribe which dwelt out in the Sahara Desert. Herodotus tells a story that the young men of the Nasamones, that one day they drew lots in order to get someone to go and explore the limits of the Sahara Desert and find out what lay beyond them. Apparently the young men then did that, and what they found was lots of small black people, pygmies, who apparently abducted them and brought them to a town or a village on a big lake where there was loads of crocodiles. Now, the detail about the pygmy peoples being there, is plausible. We know that there are pygmy peoples in Central Africa, and it seems like perhaps in the ancient period these groups were more widespread. Okapis too may have been found further north than they are today. However, I do think it stretches credibility to think that a legit group of pygmies made the expedition all the way to Persia. I mean, it still would have been too far south for Persian authority to have had much influence, so I think it's pretty unlikely. But perhaps these were Nubians or Kushites, people to the immediate south of Egypt, who had gone out on an okapi hunt and brought with them this amazing prize to their lord in Persia. I mean, it truly would be the most extraordinary gift. Or perhaps it is depicting pygmies, but pygmies themselves weren't actually there, in order to just signify the connection between these furthest forest realms and this animal. The pygmies are there figuratively to show that the okapi comes from the land of the pygmies. I don't know, I'm spitballing here, this is conjecture. But anyway, it just bears thinking about if this really was an okapi. Just imagine Xerxes sitting there in his palace at Apadana with his long, luxuriant beard. Yes, he would have had a nice long beard, not being a bald, androgynous, giant freak like in 300. Damn you, 300! But yeah, imagine Xerxes with this long beard, this glittering palace, surrounded by Sparabara, these men with long spears and shields, his immortals, with their bows, and just covered in lions on the walls, motifs of bulls, all green and blue tiles and gold. And in this glittering palace, all the delegations of the world coming to him, from the Greeks to the Indians to now the Africans, bringing this brown, zebra-like giraffe creature with its long black tongue into the room. Just imagine how astonishing that would be, how astonished everyone would be to see such a wonderful creature. But is there anything deeper we can learn from this episode with the potential okapi? Firstly, I think it pays immense testament to the extraordinary interconnectedness of the ancient world. We often think of the ancient world or earlier periods as being much more isolated, insular. To consider that an animal, a forest animal from the center of Africa might have got to the court of the Shahanshah, it's pretty freaking epic. This points to a world brimming with trade and with different ideas and stories and conversations following along that trade. A world which connected with these trade routes the steaming jungles of Central Africa to the arid plains of Iran. And the Okapi still makes our jaws drop with awe, as it no doubt would have done to the Persian courtiers and soldiers. But, and maybe this is just some food for thought, such things are subjective, right? No doubt to a pygmy in the Congo, okapis aren't really that special. Everything's about our perspective. For example, we may remember that my ancestors, the Celts of Iron Age Britain, in the time of Julius Caesar, these people revered and worshipped chickens. Now, I know that sounds funny and ridiculous, right? But they sincerely revered chickens, these beautiful birds, and go and check out a chicken. Honestly, not in a weird way, but they are beautiful. The details on their plumage, their coxcombs, and these ancient Britons were doting on these animals lovingly because they were recent arrivals in Britain. They were rare, they were beautiful, and they were appreciated. In fact, we even have chicken burials from the Iron Age, and guess what? There are no slaughter marks. These animals were lovingly, tenderly buried, probably after a natural death. Okapis, though, we still think these guys are awesome, but chickens, well, I think it's fair to say we treat them with contempt. Is our discrimination justified? Well, if it's only on the basis of rarity, sure. But when we're talking about conscious beings, people, animals, surely these things have deeper value, intrinsic value, rather than just how exotic they are. The Persians themselves clearly like to titillate themselves with exotica. Why else would you import an okapi? As we titillate ourselves by musing on the foreignness and the weirdness of Persia. And maybe in our attachment to the beautiful and the strange, we neglect deeper truths. That, from a certain perspective, the Persians were far more civilized than the Greeks, and that chickens are as amazing as okapis. Thanks for watching.